Audio check for oral history interview with Clare Cull, November 25th, 2000 at her home on Beaver Island. Audio video check for oral history interview with Clare Cull, November 25th, 2000.
You gotta speak louder. Keep going. Louder. Start it again. Audio video.
Audio video check. Oral history interview with Clare Cull on her home at Beaver Island, November 25th, 2000.
Why don't we just start out, Mom, by telling us, a little bit about yourself. You were born on Beaver Island.
On the point.
Go for it. You were born?
Let's go.
Yeah.
Yes, I was born in
You
Beaver
guys-
Island.
We have to speak real loud.
Yes, I was born in Beaver Island, over on the point, in a house that was the other side of Johnny Andy's old house over there now, and it burnt down. And then we moved to what was known as Scheid's house. And my sister and brother, Anna Mae and Bud, were both born in Scheid's house. And that's where she died, when Buddy was born.
And when you moved from the point at the house at the point, who owned that house?
I don't know if my dad owned it or who owned it. All I know is that that's where they were living. And that's where I was born.
And Ann told me that that's where she lived when she was a girl, so it might have been...
In the big left
It
house,
would've been-
she was.
Oh, it's a different house.
She wasn't in the same, I was in a smaller house next to Mom and Papa Lepp's house on the point. And Ann and that generation were born in the big house where Johnny Andy's house sits, but that burnt too, and then they built another house, and that's the house Johnny Andy's place is now.
Okay, when you were 3 years old, what happened?
When I was 3 years old is when my mother died. That was 12 or 13 days after Buddy was born. She hemorrhaged to death. Dr. Palmer was the doctor on the island at the time, and he was going away. He came from Canada, him and his wife, Sue, and they were going away. It seems to me that it would be odd that they would be going. I was going to say it wouldn't be in March, it would have been in June. Buddy was born in June, June 1st, and it was 13 days after he was born that the doctor went away, I suppose vacationing. And they got a hold of him. See, back in those days, there was no telephone. So it was by wire, which I imagine it was from the Coast Guard station that they sent what they called a wire, I imagine a telegram, and got him back here. And he came back, and the next day they started going to take my mother to the mainland, to Charlevoix, on a fish tug. But Dr. Palmer could see she was too far gone, so they turned the fish tug around and brought her back home. Now, I don't know for sure if she was already dead or if she died, the same day but hours later.
Now, do you remember having any of your aunts or uncles tell you, like, who was on the fish tug with her, who was with her when she died?
I know my dad would have been on the fish tug with her. But, and other than him and the doctor, I don't know who else would have been on there. See, I was only 3 years old, but I don't remember any of them saying who else would have been on the tug.
All right, with your mother dying and you just being 3 years old, and Anna Mae must have been what, 1?
1,
And Buddy was just an
13
infant.
days.
13 days. What happened after that as far as you continued to live with your father at the point? Or at the Shire
Well,
house?
I couldn't tell you that if I continued to live with who. All I know is that the Grandma Gillespie, my mother's mother, took the baby, and he never left Mom and Pa's. There was no adoption or anything, but they took him and kept him and raised him as their own. With me, I kind of don't remember if I stayed, well, I was only 3, so I don't know how long I stayed with my dad, or if we went like to my dad's mother, Mama left, my grandmother, or if I went up home at that time with Ma too. Nobody ever told me. But I do know that the Mama left, and then they took my sister to live with them. They moved away to Charlevoix, and she went to live with them. And I think I lived a little bit with them because I remember, well, when I was 6 years old, I got burnt in a bonfire in the first grade of school up here on the island. And I don't know how I survived it, but I did. And 3rd-degree burns, and I, of course, couldn't go to school all that winter. Got burnt in a bonfire, burning the leaves at the schoolyard in the fall when school started. And
Well, when you were growing up, now you stayed with your dad for a while, and you went back and forth a little bit.
with the grandparents,
With
a
the
little bit.
grandparents, a little bit.
But they went away to move to Charlevoix. And of course my dad did too, and was fishing out of Charlevoix for the crosses. And then my next recollections is, well, I can remember after my back healed a little, I didn't go to school at all that winter with the 3rd-degree burns. And I remember Emil and Dolores got married, and this, of course, would be the following year in the spring or summer. And Dolores took me with them to Sheboygan. But I don't know, I don't remember just how long I stayed over there with them. You see, Emil was working on the patrol boat, and that was their home port, or whatever you call it. And so that's why Dolores and Emil were in Sheboygan, and they took me back with them, but I don't know how long I was with them. And then when I did come back home here to Ma and Pa,
Ma and Pa
wasn't
Gillespie.
Ma and Pa Gillespie, my grandparents. When I did come back to the island, then I went up home with Ma and Pa and stayed until my next recollection is my dad got married over in Charlevoix. And my sister and I had to go and live with him. I didn't want to leave Mom and Pa. But I did. And it didn't work out too good. We weren't happy. Well, it went on that way for I don't know how many years. I know that I was probably 8 by the time he remarried. I have pictures that I'm guessing myself to maybe be 8 years old. And I went then to live with him and his new wife. And of course then we got Carlene that I loved. But it wasn't happy.
So you eventually moved back
I moved
with
back
Mom and
with
Papa.
Mom and Pa.
I see.
And my sister went anime. She ended up with Aunt Kay in Chicago. And we never did go back to live with them, with my dad and his wife.
But Aunt Carlene, who was a baby,
She stayed with them,
with
but
them.
then she would come and be with me in the summertime. I remember her coming here, and she was such a little girl, and I was living, by this time I was married, now where we're at, because I'm kind of jumping way ahead. Dad and I were married by this time, and living in Aunt Grace's little house. And Carlene was allowed to come and spend the summer with me.
Okay, let's go back a little bit though. Let's go back, tell me about the period of time when you were working like at the King Strang Hotel washing dishes. How old was you then? 14, 15?
Well, no, that was later. In Charlevoix, while I lived in Charlevoix, I started working for Uncle Franklin. He had a little restaurant called the Chatterbox there on Bridge Street. And it wasn't very big. I remember I had to stand on milk crates to reach down in the big sinks. They were so deep to wash dishes. And then, I don't know how long I had to wash dishes, but I finally graduated where I waited table for him. Yeah. It wasn't at the King Strang till after I moved back to the Iron with Mom and Pa. Then I worked at the King Strang with Aunt Grace.
When you were 16, 17 years old, how old were you when you met Dad? And how did you meet him?
I don't remember meeting Dad in Charlevoix, but I don't know if him told me the story or some of the other lads at that age told me that Dad made the remark. Sounds silly today. I'm going to marry her. And that's before I ever was out. I didn't go out and start dating Dad till I was here in high school. But, you know the way stories go. And Dad said that himself.
So, tell us about like when you got married. You were 17, Dad was 19.
No, Dad was 20.
And where did you get married?
Right here in Beaver Island. Father Keenan married us. And we lived in Aunt Grace's little house. And see, at that time she was right at the King Strang. She had her own room down there. And she stayed right there. So I was living in her little house. And that's where Dale was born. And We had good times though, working at the King String. There's some stories I could have told you about that too.
Well, just tell us one time. Do you have one story that stands out in your mind?
Well, it's about the two of us. She was quite a boss, my aunt. We were expecting a big, huge crowd the next day coming to the hotel. So, of course, we knew we had to be on our toes. So, she said to me, well, you're not going out anywhere tonight or uptown tonight because we have to be up and be sharp for tomorrow for all this bunch of people coming. So, I had a room at the King String too, like she did. So I went up the stairs, and when I thought that she was the head down, asleep, I was going to sneak out, because your dad was waiting for me at the gate. I got down the stairs, and we had to go through the laundry room, and there was a window or door there, and I'm going out, and I met Aunt Grace. She was beating me to it. She was going out too. We had quite a laugh over it, but we both got caught. One thinking they were putting it over on the other.
So where on Beaver Island did you get married?
At Holy Cross Church.
Was it a big wedding?
Every wedding on the island in them days was big. Yeah. As I remember, church, was full.
And the reception was at the parish hall?
No, at Grandma Cull's. I remember, oh dear God. I don't remember who was playing the piano. But anyway, Aunt Grace and Dr. Palmer were dancing a little bit, and everybody was having a good time. And as I remember, Sue got upset with Dr. Palmer because he was dancing with Aunt Grace. It kind of made for a laugh, for the whole crowd to think that Sue was jealous. Dancing with Aunt Grace. Yep.
So you had Dale was born in
Aunt Grace's little house.
And
But then Dad went in the service. See, the war came. And your dad went in the service, and he got an apartment. It wasn't much of an apartment. God, it was small. Anyway, I packed myself up, me and my baby, and traipsed out. No, first of all, Aunt Kay wrote to me and wanted me to come to Chicago to be with her while your dad was in Great Lakes. And that way we'd see him.
in Great Lakes what?
Naval in Chicago, Illinois, or not right in Chicago.
The Great Lakes
Naval
Naval Training.
Naval Training Station. So we did. We packed up and went on the train to Chicago. Aunt Margaret and Uncle Earl Miller were on the train with me. And Dale was a baby and slept all the way. And Aunt Kay met me at the train station. And we stayed there with her then until your dad was transferred or shipped out, as they call it. And then I came back home with Dale and went right back over to Montpaz. I never stayed alone, and I went over home. I mean, I never went back to Aunt Grace's little house. I'm trying to think if somebody must have been in there when I came back, and it seems like there was a man here working, I think at the light plant, and they had it rented. If I could remember his name, but I can't remember right this minute. But we stayed with Ma and Pa, Dale and I, lived up home until your dad, till the war was over, till Dad come home. And I was worrying and wondering what we were going to do. And Jewel said there was an apartment behind his house. And he said, why don't you move into that apartment until you get a place, or, you know. But, so we did. We moved in behind Jewel and Rita. Pa used to babysit for the two of us. So, Jewel and Rita and Dad and I, so that we could all go down to the Shamrock on Saturday night. And there was just a door between the two apartments. They lived in the front, we lived in the back. Pa'd babysit for Johnny and Dale. And those were good times too. I guess the war was over and the boys were all home.
That must have been amazing growing up in such a small community with you living in the back of Uncle Jewel's house, right next door to, Dad's living right next door to his parents' home, and you're right across the street from where you grew up.
Ma and Pa.
Everything was very tight and...
Very tight. And then that's where we had Mike and Dennis. Were both born up there, in back of Joe's. Pretty crowded.
Michael was he the one that went into the oven as an incubator?
Well, on the oven door. Oh God, he was a sight. He was so lanky. The lankiest little body. Oh my, he was hard to imagine today. He would have been an incubator baby. But we didn't have such a thing, so we lined a bassinet with cotton and soft blankets, put the bassinet in the oven door. He survived. My Valentine, born in February 14. Yeah, but he lived. I remember when we took him up to church to be baptized. Father Keenan said there was a reason that this child is being baptized, that he lived under the conditions, you know. No hospital, no incubator, no nothing. But he did, he survived. I think he's the tallest, biggest one of the family, as the boys grew up.
And you had a couple girls go on to...
Well, I had the three boys, Dale and Michael and Dennis. And of course then I got pregnant and things weren't right, so I had to go to Charlotte. And that's where Carly was born. And there was a story behind that. I got over to Charlevoix and my ma was in the Charlevoix hospital.
Grandma Gillespie.
Right, Grandma Gillespie. I don't remember what she was in for, but she was there and so was Elvira. Elvira was in the hospital. Well, it was something because here I arrived and expecting my baby. It ended up there was 4 of us in the Charlevoix hospital at the same time, 4 generations. For years I kept the clipping, but I don't know what happened to it. You know, it got lost or destroyed maybe when we moved, I don't know. But anyway, Carly was born in Charlotte.
So there was 4 generations in the family right there.
Right.
And now by this time the war is over and Dad is
Oh,
back
the
home.
war has been over.
And Dad's back here fishing.
We're ahead of our story with Clare. After the war, when Dad come home, and we moved him back at Jules. Yeah, your dad went right back to the commercial fishing. He was the captain on the La Farm, was the name of the tug. And oh, he did so well that first year. He caught a lot of fish. Caught a lot of fish that first year or two that he got back. He got out of the service and they gave him, all the boys, what they called a mustering out check. It didn't amount to too much, but it was enough that we started this home, put in the basement, and then we were broke. So that was all for that winter, that fall. So then the next spring, they were out on the lake every day. I just think Dad said he was 12 or 13 when he took over his dad's place. And started in the spring to build this house. No money. So we went up to where the museum is now, started all this trim in this house out of, it was called Joe Burke's then, and Grandpa Cull owned it. And we just kept getting what wood we could, or lumber, whatever you called it. And then my brother bought it from Grandpa Cull. So we were still, hey, we stripped her as much as we could with what we could use. And there was a lumberman, Al Thorson was his name, and he used to come here to the island all the time. And he let us charge whatever they needed, you know, in the lumbering. And then it was pay as you go. Yeah, so that's the way this house got built.
That would have been what, around 1951, wasn't it?
I'm not sure. Oh, the fruit flies in my mind. Oh, or 52 maybe. So, right around there, yeah.
So when fishing, when the lamprey eel started coming in and hampering the fishing industry, things got tight. How long did Dad struggle fishing
Oh, we
before?
struggled.
How long did he struggle before he went on the lake freighters?
Well, we didn't have, there was no savings accounts in them days. You lived from paycheck to paycheck, you know. And Uncle Bud got talking to him that winter and wanted your dad to ship out on the big freighters. And I didn't want it because I didn't want him to go and leave me with all these kids. So anyway, Buddy talked him into it and going, writing for a license. Your dad never sailed. He fished. Well, your dad told Buddy, I can't go to a school this winter and write for a license. There's no money. Buddy said, I got the money. We'll go together. Oh, I was mad. I was furious at my brother. The plane landed down here on the ice. I wouldn't go down this river. Mad. Anyway, he went. Him and Buddy went to school all that winter. By God, he passed everything. With flying colors, never sailed a day in his life. Went third mate. That was the start of it all. Kept going and going. Up and up, all these different steamboats.
Climbing the hosepipe.
Climbing right up the ladder. Till finally, I got mad again. I always had to get mad to get where I wanted to go. So, I was in dire straits trying to get wood hauled down here. And me alone with these kids. And I had made a trip with Dad in the boat. And I didn't want to move. No, I wanted to go off the island forever. But I wouldn't go to Toledo or Detroit. And those were the ports that your dad would be, going. So finally, I'm on with them, and we made a trip into Bay City, Michigan. And I liked Bay City. It wasn't too big a town, like Detroit and Toledo. And he was on smaller boats where he'd be at port, be home. So I got off the boat with him, came home, couldn't get wood. So I said, this is it. I got up, went down to James Gallagher's, where the phone was. We had a friend that had a cottage here on the island, lived in Bay City. His name was Ted Heine. I called Ted Heine in Bay City and told him my problem. And I said, Ted, do you think you could find me a house? He said, I'll try. It was only a few days, and I got old James Gallagher come to the door and said I was wanted on the phone. Down I went. Now it's fall of the year. And he said, I got a house for you. I said, when can I have it? Whenever you get here. So I come home and I immediately started. I packed up what? It was furnished, this house he got. So we packed up what we had to have for the winter. Donald Cull got a truck. Now I don't know, but I think it was Elston Pishner's truck. A pickup truck. And loaded everything on the truck. And we had an old green Dodge. And your dad called. And I said, I'm leaving here Tuesday. The year came through the phone. You're what? I said, Ray, I got a house to rent in Bay City and I'm leaving Beaver Island. Whew. He didn't know a thing about it. But I took the boat up the horns and I went.
Some might say it was the best decision you ever made.
One of the best. Marrying your dad was the best.
So how many children did you have at that time when you moved to Bay City?
Michael, Dennis, Carly, and Bonnie was born here in the medical center, the last one. But I was expecting Mary. I left here on my dad's birthday. October 9th. Mary was born a month later in Bay City.
November 10th.
November 10th. Yeah, November 10th. So, you'd think I was going to Nome, Alaska.
Do you remember the first day when Dad came home off the ship and you came to Bay City? Do you remember that day?
No. But I remember I remember Mary was born. No, I might get these stories mixed up. Because it might not have been Mary. But Dad come home, his boat was in, I think Muskegon. And he got the word, I don't know, it was Mary, November. But it seems to me it was Mary. And he called Father Vic up. Father was stationed in Muskegon. And he went to the boat and picked up Dad. And the two of them came to Bay City that night. I don't know if it was the same night or maybe the next night after the baby was born. And I was mad again. Here they come, the two of them, down the hall. I don't know what hour in the night it was. In the hospital, and of course, they told him to go on in. Couldn't see your dad's face for flowers. First time in his life he ever brought flowers. First baby born in the city where he could get flowers. But they were pretty merry anyway.
What about when you left the island? Wasn't there quite a scene at the boat dock?
Well, Bonnie, it wasn't at the boat dock. I refused to go on the boat because I didn't want to say goodbye to anybody. So I said, no, we will fly off. So I wouldn't have to say goodbye. They had a big party the night before for us at the beach coma. And I said the goodbyes there. So anyway, I said, well, I'm not going down that boat. Always was sad leaving on the boat. I said, we're going to take the plane. So up to the airport we went.
And who would have taken you to the airport?
Well, Grandma and Grandpa Cull. I took Rollin with me and Grandma. And we went up to the airport. First of all, I had to go over to Uncle Jules and get your dad, because him and Jewel were awful sad. Your dad was very sad leaving the island. They had to fortify themselves a bit. But anyway, I said it's time to go to the airport, so away we went. My God, it was horrendous. I think everybody on this island was at that airport. And here me would not go on the boat, so I wouldn't have to do that. So, where's the goodbyes of the camp? We're boarding the plane, and Joe McPhillips said, Claire, we better wait a minute. There's a car coming awfully fast. So we waited for 5 minutes or whatever. And who was it coming? Mary Duffy and Willie John. So anyway, away we went.
And when you left, you say you took Uncle Round, did you say you took Grandma with you as well?
No,
Oh.
Rowan graduated that spring, and this was in the fall. And yeah, I took Rowan with me to Bay City, and he got a little job at Frosted Foods, I remember that. And, but it wasn't enough, so he shipped out. Your dad took him on the boats too. Out of Bay City. Can't remember what boat it was. He was on so many.
Now, you knew some other people in Bay City, didn't you?
The only ones I knew was Marguerite and Vern Runberg. And their family lived there.
Dr. Vale?
And Dr. Vale and his wife, Ann. He was my doctor here on the island, and when he left, he said, Claire, I'm going to write out a letter for you. Whoever your new doctor will be, just give him this letter as to instructions on me and my health and that, because I was expecting Mary. So I didn't like to see him leave me. So when I decided to make my big move to Bay City, I took that letter with me that Dr. Vale wrote. And when I got moved down there, I called his office. He was in practice back in Bay City, to make an appointment. And his receptionist or whatever, I guess that's what they're, I told her the story and about the letter that Dr. Vale gave me. And I said, little did I know, never dreamt that I would be moving to Bay City right behind him. So I said, I'd kind of like if you wouldn't tell him who his next patient, who I would, would be next in line. So they didn't. So I went to the office, and they put me in one of the office rooms, and he busted, stepping right along, so lively I can remember. Walked right by me, and he got by me, and he turned around and looked back. Clare, Cull, what are you doing here? And I handed him that letter. I said, you told me to give this letter to my next doctor, and you got it. He couldn't get over it. I was so happy to have him. So things work out. You never think at the time they're going to be that way, but it did, because I made it do. So we lived there in that rented house for a year, for that winter. And come spring, we had Mary then in November, and I'm getting ahead of myself again. Christmas was coming, and your Aunt Betty wanted us to come to Chicago and not be our first Christmas in Bay City alone. Me and my troops.
Was Dad on the ship at that time?
He was on the ship, but he got off. The boat laid up, and him and Roland got off and come home. And Betty kept writing, and I kept saying no. All we had was that Dodge car, and Roland and all our kids. Betty, I said, we can't do that. We can't, all of us, go to Chicago in that. yes, you can. You're not going to stay there. Well, it went on and on for probably right up till near Christmas time. And of course, then the mailman came with a Christmas tree from Beaver Island that Aunt Grace and Johnny was a little boy. And they tied the Christmas tree up, wrapped it in rug bags, and mailed it to us. You would think we had $1 million. Oh, a tree from Beaver Island. So, Betty kept calling. You're not going to stay up there. So finally I had to give in. I said, I don't know how we'll do it. But we'll see. But can you imagine? Rowan driving us, Dad and I, and all the kids, and Mary Beth, a baby, and a bassinet on the floor. In that Dodge. And away we went like the Beverly Hillbillies or somebody to Chicago for Christmas. We were crazy to do it, but I guess we had a good time, did we, Bonnie? Do you remember?
I would only have been 2.
Oh, she was only 2. I guess it was a big time when Betty's house was overflowing. But she got her way. She got us there. It was quite a Christmas. But by this time, see, I'm ahead of my story again because I moved in October on my dad's birthday. I left this island. And I was only in Bay City a month. If I was that long, I don't think I was a month. And the telephone rings. And of course, every time it rang, I thought it was your dad checking on me because we were expecting Mary. But who was it but my sister, Carly? Can I come and live with you?
She would have been, what, 18?
She just graduated in June. Well, I said, Carly, you know you don't have to ask me that. Of course you could come and live with me. I said, how are you going to do it? All I could think of was she'd have to go on the bus. But she had a ride. Mabel Perro's daughters were kind of far back related to us, to Pa. And they were coming downstate, and she got a ride with them. And they brought her to me. She moved in, bag and baggage. She was there until she ended up getting married herself, her and Morris Rumbert, and got a home of her own. But she spent all them years with me, with Dad and I, and all our kids.
How many years? Maybe 4 or 5 years?
Oh, God, no more than that. I kind of wish Dale was here, because he could probably remember these things more than me. God bless me, how old would she have been? She was with us longer than that. But she was just like one of my kids. I never turned anybody away, John. He was just like one of my own.
So at that time you had both Aunt Carlene and Uncle Rollin, right? Or was Uncle
No,
Rollin, he was
Rollin
sailing?
stayed in Chicago. When we went for Christmas, Rollin stayed in Chicago. But Rollin was sailing with Dad before Christmas. He was with me maybe, well, he was probably with me till Carlene came, maybe a month at Frosted Food. And then he went with your dad, and Ray got him a job on the boat. And made room for Carlene to sneak in. Yeah.
So tell us when you bought 214 South Keys.
God, this Well, we lived in the house on Lynn Street that winter. It killed me every month to pay that month's rent. I despised paying rent. So I was looking for a house. So come spring, I found the house, 214 South Kiesel, because it was a big house. It was a good house. It was the Lutheran minister's house to start with. And it was in a good neighborhood. And it says me, this is the place for me and my brood. So I can't remember if Dad got off the boat because we stayed on Lynn Street till school was out. And the kids were in St. Mary's School. And we stayed there until school was out. When school was out, I hightailed it again to 214, the house I bought in Basin. And we stayed there all those years until we sold it, raised our family.
So by this time you're down to Mary's the last child, and then Jim, the rest of
There
them
was
came.
no end to this. Yeah, Mary, then Jimmy came, then Julie came. And I guess we thought Julie was going to be it. That's how she got Sissy. She was the little sissy of the flock. But that ain't the way it worked. Pretty soon here come Peggy. And finally you. And that ended it. You were going to be my Patrick. President Kennedy was assassinated. Patrick went out the window and John F. stayed.
What about the house on the island all these years?
Oh, gollies, kids, that's another long story. Like I said, we moved off October 5th. Just seemed like we weren't down there a month, I guess, and I started getting the phone calls. There was no restaurant on the island and hunting season was coming. And the lads on the island had what they called a game club. They all belonged to this club they called the game club, and no restaurant for the hunters. So they started calling me. Buddy McDonough, I guess. And I said, "Yous are crazy. Why would you even think of such a thing? That little house isn't built for a restaurant." "No, but it's the only place vacant in town. We have to have some place to make coffee and soup or whatever for these hunters." Well, I said, "I can't give you an answer like that till I talk it over with Ray." So Dad called again as he was doing every few days. He was calling. I told him about them wanting to rent this house. I don't know why I had to think I had to wait for him to tell me. I did everything else without him knowing, I guess. Or okay in it, but anyway, he said let them go in there. So that was the first of it. They come in here just to have a place for the hunters to get coffee and soup, homemade soup and chili, I suppose, and whatever. Well, that was the start of it, and it went on year after year. Aunt Grace got in here. And every summer we'd come for our 2 weeks in the summertime. And She was killing herself working in this place making a restaurant. Killing herself up and down them stairs. So I'd tell her, I want her out. This has gone far enough. Your dad would call her back. Yeah, Grace, you can stay in that house as long as you want to. So of course, 17 years this went on. But she had a reputation for the best home-cooked food in all of northern Michigan. She was a wonderful cook. So, she got in here, and when we'd come, we had to go up and stay at the old house. As we called it, the cat house.
Now, we've talked about all good times so far,
Yeah.
basically, but, like, can you remember, like, were you able to come back to the island, like, when Ma and Pa passed away?
Oh, indeed. Indeed. Uncle Bud got off the boat, off his boat, and came to Bay City when we got the phone call from Elvira that Ma went. So Buddy was to leave the next day on the bus for Charlevoix, but he didn't. He waited, and we came up together to the funeral. Oh yeah. Well, then Aunt Grace moved over home in the old house with Pa, and she was there and took care of Pa all his days until he passed away.
And how many years after Ma died did Pa live? Wasn't it quite a few years?
Yes, gollies. I don't know, would it be more than 10? I don't know, John. It was a long time. I don't even know if it was 10, but the years went on and Pa was a care. Big care. Yeah. And Grace moved in home. And then after Pa was gone, she still stayed in the old house. By this time she had given her little house to her grandson, her oldest grandson, Hugh. And so she stayed right on over home after Pa died. That's where she stayed the rest of her life. Yeah. Lots of stories could be told about that house. I thought I had told you all of them. Always, always a house full of people. It was amazing what went on in that old house. How they loved to play cards, penny ante, poker. I always said you couldn't wash your feet in our house after supper because the card players were there. What fun they had. Ma loved it as much as Willie John. Oh dear, all of them, Earl Huey and Willie John. Cornel Gatliff was the youngest. Barney Mooney. The table was full. And they fought for them, played hard for them pennies of, you'd think they were dollars. But the fun they had. Yeah, they were great years. They were what we called the golden years. Oh dear God, they were not much golden. And you think that the way we lived, but oh, so much love. Never went to bed hungry night in our life. Never. Mom was such a good cook and Pa, oh, he could bake. Cookies and donuts and homemade bread and always, always lots to eat in our house. Not fancy food, but everything's so good. Such good cooks.
Living.
Ma working out at the Brothers when we were kids, Buddy and I. And when the Brothers left in the fall of the year, and we got all the stuff, the groceries that were left, we thought we were rich as kings.
When you were growing up, let's go back in time a little bit. When you were growing up here, like when Ma and Pa and Levy were still alive, and can you tell us a little bit about our family ancestry on that side of the family?
Not much, because I didn't live with them. Ma and Pa and Levy lived upstairs over the beachcombers. And I've told this, I guess, a number of times. That's where I learned how to dance. Dancing was the biggest thing always on the island, entertainment. There wasn't much else to do, dancing. But I can remember as a little girl or a young girl learning to dance up there with Aunt Kay, and we called her Betty O'Donnell, who was a cousin, and them teaching me how to dance. Oh my God, it was something. And I remember Pa and Levy sitting in the chair, rocking chair with his pipe, and watching us. As Aunt Kay used to say, just letting the sparks fly. But Ma and Levy, I was pretty young for all of that. I can tell you stories that I remember being told or them saying when I was little up there. Pa and Levy was a very smart man. They called him Old Sam, for I guess Uncle Sam. But he was quite a smart man, I understood people to say. But he wasn't too ambitious. And there was a group of men down on the ground in the yard, sawing his wood or cutting his wood. And Ma and Levy's supposed to have tried to shame him, why wasn't he down there helping them? And Pa and Levy's supposed to have said, "Ha, God love you, dear. All the fools ain't dead yet." Here he had a crew of men down cutting his wood, him sitting in the rocking chair with his pipe.
And who were Ma and Pa's children?
Ma on the left.
Which would have been Hannah.
Wait, yeah. Aunt Margaret Miller, Aunt Annie McCann, Aunt Nellie O'Donnell, Aunt Sadie, that lived in Chicago, and several boys, Uncle Dan, Uncle Joe. It was a big family. They were the family.
And so then.
And then they had my grandmother left when she married Papa, who was Frankie, left. And then they had, let's see, Uncle Joseph left, Carl left, my dad,
Gerald.
Uncle Gerald, Aunt Ann, Aunt Margaret Lockerman,
Okay.
Aunt Margaret, Aunt Kay. Seems like I'm missing
Uncle
somebody.
Franklin.
And Franklin. Kay was the baby. She was a character. She said they saved the best till last. They had her.
I agree.
She was like a sister to me. Both her and Elvira. She was a character, I'll tell you.
And tell us where you got your name from.
My full name. From them two aunts. Roberta, Clare. Roberta was Aunt Kay's name. Clare was Elvira's name. Elvira Clare. And Roberta Catherine. I was named for the two of them.
Francis.
And then Ma named every one of us Francis. Yeah, Francis was tacked on to me too. I think Ma was awful crazy, but Pa, she named all of us Francis, one way or another. But we all got Francis. Quite a life, John. Quite a life.
I think at this point we're going to take a 5-minute break. Okay?
Thank you.
Mom, tell us a little bit about, like, when you were growing up, before you were married, some of the people on the island that you remember, the characters, the people that left a lasting impression with you.
Well, not before I was married. I don't think I remember too much. You know, I came back here from Charleroi to live and to go to school and lived up home with Ma and Pa. And it was after that that I can remember the fun times, or what we did for fun, which wasn't a whole lot. We had a lot of house parties. That was the only kind we had, was house parties. And I can remember we'd make fudge or make candy, you know, and put it outside in the wintertime to cool or to harden. And then the boys would go and steal it on us.
What boys? Like who?
Uncle Speck and Herbie Martin and your dad. I don't know if he stole it from me or not. You wouldn't think he would. But Bob Gatliff, you know, Bob Gatliff to this day that we never meet, that he don't start. He was trying to date me, and I was for dating Dad. And Tom Gatliff had the garage up next to home. The cat house, home. And Bob worked for his dad, and they had a showcase with candy bars and gum, cigarettes. Well, Bob was trying to get me to go out with him. Speck wanted me to go out with him. But I always went with Ray. And Bob, he'd come over from the gas station with the Mound candy bars. And he tells us every time we're together in these late years that he bought me the candy bars, the Mounds, and wiped the dishes. And then I turn down and go with your dad. Which was true. It really was true. I did. That was a bit wrong for me. But I tell him, well, you only took the candy bars out of the garage. But anyway, your Uncle Speck always wanted me to double date with him, and he would get Anna Mae Cunningham and want your dad, or me, to go with Bob. Yeah. But anyway, then he'd get mad about it, and I always had a big bonfire on the hill in the wintertime for sledding. And then Speck would say to Mom to not let me go, because he was mad because I wouldn't go on the double date with him and Anna Mae Cunningham and Bob. Okay. So it went on and on, of course, so I knew damn well one way or another I was going to get back at him. There was a dance hall next to our house up there where the garage is. I don't know if I'm ahead of the story or behind it, but anyway, Speck was sneaking cigarettes, smoking. And he was too young to be doing it. So he wouldn't tell Ma to not let me go to the hill sliding. So I told Ma he was smoking underneath the dance hall next door. So I said, go out there right now and you'll see him and Herbie Martin. And they are too smoking. So Ma went out and me behind her, showing her where they were. Well, she got Speck on the run. He ran in the house. Up the stairs he went, under the bed. And her behind. And me behind her. Ma had the broom. Me telling her which way to poke it to get him. Oh God, what we did. Another time, he caught me smoking in the toilet and locked the toilet, locked me in. I don't know who was with me. I suppose Dorothy. Dorothy and I were we the pals? We were the best friends. She was so different than her sisters are. Oh, she was my best friend. And I'll tell you what kind of a friend she was. She was working in the garage next door for Tom. And I never had any money to chip in for this learning how to smoke cigarettes. But Dorothy could get the cigarettes at the garage, the same as Bob got the Mountain candy bars. So I could just get one from Dorothy. Well, I'd go over there and we'd smoke in the garage. So finally, it was a terrible thing I did. But everybody had cows they milked. That was our milk. And they put them in pans, milk pans, you know, and the cream would all go on the top. And we used to dip cookies in there and pull it out and the cream would stick to the cookie. Wondered we all didn't get fat. We did. But anyway, get back to the milk and the bread pans and the cigarettes smoking. I went in the pantry and a mouse had fallen from the shelf into the pan of milk and drowned. I don't know what, Dorothy and I were having a battle or we did something anyway and I was going to get at her. So I got the dead mouse by the tail and took it over, put it in her purse, that big, and then asked her for a cigarette. Oh my God almighty, you never heard the smoke turned blue, the swearing out of her. God almighty, she was going to kill me. And I was scared when I saw how upset she got because she had had rheumatic fever. And that's a heart condition. I thought she was going to have a heart attack and then I'd lose her altogether. Well, she wouldn't talk to me for days. It wouldn't have nothing to do with me. Oh, I was feeling awful bad. But it ended anyway in a couple of days. But she never let me forget it. She'd threaten me. She wouldn't get another pack of cigarettes and share with me. So I said, well, if we're going to learn, I'll get one from Peggy Reen, who was my cousin, Peggy Courier. And she was living with her grandma up on the hill where Donald and Lil lived. That was the Gallagher house. And Peggy could always get nickels from Grandma Gallagher. So Dorothy got her nickel out of the cash register at the garage. Peggy would get her nickel from her grandma, and then she'd go sneak another nickel to pay for me, because I never had the nickel.
It cost a nickel for a cigarette, or?
15 cents for a package, and there was the 3, see? So Peggy'd get the nickel. So then we graduated from the garage, and we got up behind the school, and we'd hide the package of cigarettes in a coffee can, and we'd go out there for the lesson to learn how to smoke. And oh, sicker than a dog. You gotta keep trying. I can remember they were older. Peggy was older, and Mary Ruth was her age, and she was there, and they'd say, well, you gotta keep trying or you're not gonna learn how. So we learned. We got the knack of how to smoke. That was the start of the big times, big grown-up thing to do, smoking cigarettes.
Tell us a little bit about some of the, like when you were growing up, Aunt Kay wasn't that much older than you, and
Aunt
Elvira
Kay-
wasn't that much older than you.
Elvira was living in Charlevoix. Elvira was already married. And she and Soupy were living in Charlevoix. And Aunt Kay was living in Chicago. So, you know, that era was kind of past, except for summer vacations when we'd all see each other. And until I went and lived with Kay during the war, when she invited me down to stay with her when your dad was at Great Lakes. Other than that, they were gone. Elvira was only 16 when she graduated and left. She went to work in Charlevoix for a dentist. Central Lake.
Tell us about some of the other characters on Beaver Island, people that really stood out, whether it was Willie John or Mary Duffy, or people that...
Well, of course, Willie John and Mary Duffy stand out because they were the neighbors, always the neighbors across the road. I'd sneak out the back door on Ma to get out of washing the dishes and go right straight across the road and wash dishes on a stool when I was real little for Mary Duffy, what I wouldn't do at home. It was always more fun to go to somebody else's house and do the dishes than do them for yourself at home. And Ma was big on cleaning the pantry when she'd get you in the dish pan and all them milk pans.
What about the uptown people and the downtown people?
Well, that was, and then there was the hayseeders, who were the country boys, and the fish chokers. All of them that lived up on the farms, they were the hayseeders, and the town boys were the fish chokers. There was a little rivalry always, and then there was a rivalry between uptown and downtown.
And where was the dividing line for those two parts?
I would say Miss O'Brien's, Aunt Nellie McCafferty, the house on that corner.
Or Crookshanks?
Oh, but down on the street, right on the corner, and that burnt. But that was like the dividing line. Leo Gallagher always said, gee whiz, they lucked out because they were just over the line to be uptowners. Father Beck and Leo and that bunch of the Gallaghers. They were uptowners. Beyond that, they were downtowners. We, you know, there was no, I remember when the street lights went in. Before that, it was so pitch dark, you didn't go down past the Malloy's. There was a little old house next door to Malloy's fence. I think they called it Bridgie the Jew's house. And we were scared as kids. We didn't do much travel, no. We were scared of the dark, and so many stories told to us, you know, when we were young about. It was quite a growing up. My kids would never be able to do it nowadays. How could they do it when they got a TV in every room upstairs and down?
Tell us a little bit about some more people though, like Charlie Martin and
Charlie Martin was a character, and he and my dad were very good friends. They fished together, they carried the mail on the ice together, and any skullduggery that was done, they did together too. But my dad was never a scrapper, a fighter. The grog, yes, he drank the grog, believe me. But he was no fighter. Uncle Joseph was the fighter. His brother, Joe, left. The littlest of that family, and he was pretty tough too, I guess.
Was Charlie Martin a fighter?
No, Charlie Martin wasn't a fighter. Never, to my knowledge, I never heard of him being, but you all know Stanley, and he had a brother, Elmer Floyd. Elmer was a fighter. Frank, Danny Barney, and Ben, they were fighters. Any party, wasn't a good party unless there was at least one fight. Charlie McCann, always, excuse me, and lots of fights in the Shamrock, and I'll tell you, if they got you down, they would boot the daylights right out of the guy in the ground.
In those days, was the Shamrock a place where the women went as much as the men, or not so much?
Oh yeah, we went. In my day, and in Ray's mother's day, Mother, Cull, and Dad, they would be the first ones at the tavern on Saturday. The older people dancing. Oh, yeah. Everything was around the Shamrock. See, the Beachcomber wasn't in operation till later.
So for a lot of years, the Shamrock was the only tavern in the harbor.
Right, for a long time.
tell us, go back a little bit and tell us a little bit about like when your dad, when the conservation people were chasing your dad and went to jail.
They weren't chasing my dad. You're thinking about when they were chasing your dad. And they always, we had closed season, and they'd always try to get out and get a couple of lifts, good lifts, during spawning season, when they knew the fish were in. And, well, this one incident in particular, I remember them always reminiscing and talking about it. Charlie Allers was in here, booth stock, the yacht dock was booth stock, and they packed fish, young James. Well, anyway, that's where the patrol boat #1 docked at booth stock. And they patrol all over the vicinity here around the Beavers and the other islands. Your dad would go to the Foxes, which is another island. But anyway, they were after him this fall, and I guess they maneuvered, circled around a lot of the different islands, but they couldn't catch him. He'd move. So finally this one night, there was a bunch of them in the Shamrock. The patrol boat was in here, and they were all up there at the Shamrock. And Archie Lafreniere working behind the bar. And Charlie Allers was supposed to have said, "All right, George, we can't catch that Ray Cull." They knew your dad was out. And they're talking amongst themselves, see, but Archie overheard them. In the meantime, your dad came in the front door and sitting up at the other end of the bar. I don't know who was with him because he always had an Indian crew, your dad and the Indians. Alex Wazagizik and Francis Gable were his two main men. So anyway, Archie's setting the drinks up for the game warden people, and they talking they couldn't catch Ray Cull. Archie said, that there is, why don't you, he stuttered, go up to the end of the bar and get Ray Cull. I guess they spun around on their bar stools, they couldn't believe it. They're up at the Shamrock having their cocktails, and Ray snuck in the harbor, tied up, beetle stock, and then on up the street and in the Shamrock for, why don't you go up to the end of the bar? And she said, there he is.
Well,
They did come in with a big load of fish. Ray had an awful big jag of fish. Lawrence Vesti was living up there where the restaurant is. Stony Acres restaurant is now. It was a barn. And I think Jack, when, I don't know where he drove to, but anyway, he give your dad the lights, the headlights, the signal that the game wardens were here. We didn't know how much fish he had, but we had to get word or let him know. So anyway, they got in. No headlights on the truck, the vehicle they were driving. So snuck into this harbor with that Collenberg off, that engine, pulled into the dock, boxes and boxes of fish, threw it on the back, up the back road, up the country, hid the fish in Lawrence Vesti's barn. They didn't catch us. And Mother and I on the front porch up there, walking the floor of the porch. We were sure they were going to catch them, but they didn't. Trying to make $1 to put food on the table. Never had much use for conservation or the law especially police. My sister and I were very little girls, and up where the Beachcomber is now was Mom, Pa, and Levy's, and we were hugging each other underneath. There was back stairs and down the back, and 2 policemen came to Beaver Island, and my dad, of course, was upstairs at Mom and Pa's, and my sister and I were under the stairs, little girls, petrified, never saw a policeman before in our life. Uniforms, guns on their holster. Oh, down they come with our dad in handcuffs. Take him away for small mash nets, the twine. Again, trying to make $1, trying to put food on your table. But they didn't keep him. He was back home. I don't know how he got up with it. And Kay used to sing a song. Was a judge in Charlevoix. His name was Fitch. And he was the judge. And they made up a song, Kay and Franklin, I think. Fitch with his voice like thunder. God, I wish I knew where that paper is. Anyway, my dad got out of it. I don't know how, but he did. Everything about, like your grandpa getting a pardon from the government, from the governor, was for fishing. You know, whether they'd get a hold of one net, or I don't know if it'd be a box of nets, or what it would be. But it was for some small violation like that they'd arrest them, or, you know, fines, fine them. Anyway, years after it happened to your Grandpa Cull, the family still has the pardon that the governor sent him years after it happened. How they went about that or maneuvered it, I'm not sure I can remember or know it now by heart. But there's a lot of stories, a lot of history. It isn't all with the fishing, it's when they were making the booze, moonshine, beer.
You remember those days?
I sure do. Some, not a lot, not as much as your dad did. I'm 3.5 years younger than he. But, and during the Depression, when everybody was coming back to the island to keep from starving, Aunt Margaret and Lady Largman, I remember them coming back. They lived down off Freesile behind Alice and Willie Belfi's, where Imogene lives now, in a house. And they'd make beer. They'd do anything to make $1. Us kids would look for ketchup bottles for them to bottle the beer in ketchup bottles. But they made the hard stuff, the whiskey, and they made that up at Bub Burke's, where the horse barn was, where the restaurant is now. And Bub got caught, Bub Burke got caught, and they took him away. He went to Mayo for 6 months or 3, I don't know, not too long. But
Would that have been where the song Eat a Kill came from? Do you remember that one? That
Coming over Enix Hill.
I knew that was written about Bug.
I kept trying to think of how it started.
90 days.
I was going
Jewel,
down
Jewel.
the mountain to
That's
my
it.
little cottage home.
When the revenue men were coming after me.
It was coming
And
over Enix Hill.
we were going over Enix Hill when they caught me with the still. I'll be with you when it's summertime again. But Bub went away to Mayo. Yeah.
You married into the Cull family pretty young. You had a great relationship with Mabel and Mike and all of Dad's aunts.
Best in-laws a girl could have.
Tell us a little bit about that.
What's there to tell? I never had a misunderstanding or a word with them in my life. They were good people. The best. Nice people. They came from good stock.
But like you knew Anna Reagan, you knew
All the
you were
Culls.
like family to them, and you were just you were an outlaw.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. Spent the only Christmas Anna Reagan ever had any of her family with her. When I went to Chicago to Aunt Kay's, and your dad met me, we went to Anna Reagan's for Christmas. Dale was a little guy, and I can remember her saying, first time in all her life she ever had any of her people with her for Christmas. You know, traveling wasn't easy back then. The automobiles weren't like they are nowadays. And it was hard for them it was a big trip to go back and forth to Chicago, or any of the big cities. I know our big thing was, as far as automobiles, we didn't have them here on the island like we do now. I remember we had a big, like a bus, and we called it the Blue Goose. And come Blackberry time, oh God, we hated it. We were all piled onto the back of the Blue Goose with every wash tub and boiler and pail or whatever could be found in the house, and away we'd go to the blackberry patch with a picnic lunch. Spend all day picking them blackberries. And then come home after clean them, you know, the stems out and everything. Wash the jars. Start the canning of them blackberries. I don't know how many quarts, and we had the big 2-quart jars. Had to fill them. And we hated it. But Speck, oh my God, them guys, they could always, they still do to this day, they get out of a lot that the girls had to do. But Dolores would be over here, and a dime was a dime. We'd get back from the berry patch, and here we'd be in washing jars, cleaning the berries. Dolores would give Speck a dime, and away he'd go to the Shamrock and dance all afternoon or evening, because we were in the berry patch till late. He didn't have to wash a jar or clean hair. But they always got more than the girls did. It's
Well,
an old Irish trait. The mothers in Ireland, they wouldn't let their sons go to they wouldn't tie that apron string. No. The sons were everything. The boys. And they did. They were spoiled. But we couldn't do nothing about it. No. Berrying. Blackberries. I think the Lord put them there for the birds. Huh? Mary Pat, my good friend over that hill, she was always at me to go berry pecking with her. Couldn't go berry pecking if we never had a berry.
What
But
about
she did.
stealing chickens? You ever steal a chicken?
God, Bonnie. Oh, Bonnie, why would you bring something like that up?
Go ahead, tell us.
Only once. Only once. I went to a lot of chicken feeds up in the country, and the cook got grogged where she couldn't serve us, but then we stole the chicken and went down to the house that Jack built, where Bee lives now. Mark and Clare Cross were here on the island, and they were living there. So old Pelkey put us out because Jenny got too many highballs or too many drinks. Little small kitchen, hot, cooking chickens for the hours. So he put us out. Well, before we went, they had hunting jackets on, and the back of the jacket was where they could put their game. So they got in the kitchen, and Mark Cross and Ray Cull, I don't know. For some reason, Willie John was always with us too for them feeds, and him and old man, you know. Well, anyway, they got in the kitchen and they took all the best parts of the chicken, and away we come to town. Had to feed up at Mark and Clare's, the house that Jack built. There was lots of stories. When Grandma Cull, Mabel, and Vivian Roddy, and all them were going through the chicken stealing days, there was a chicken feed up at Sophia's, Bill Pat's, and it was just the men. Well, the women thought it went far enough. So Anna Reagan was here. So she's the one that instigated the whole thing, they tell me. So up through Cull's backyard they went, and down the road to Sophia's, and the men were in playing poker. Anna Reagan was a big card player, big gambler, knew all there was about poker. So they put her in the front door to disrupt the game, or so that they wouldn't pay attention to what was going on in the kitchen, a little bit of a house. So Ann gets up and she's telling them how to play their poker game. While she's in, had the men distracted. Mabel and Vivian and, oh God, I don't know how many of them. They went in the kitchen door, stole all the chicken and the men. Away they went and left nothing but the wings for them. lots of stories about stealing chickens and fudge, and we'd make freezers full of ice cream and turn the damn things for hours. They'd steal that. Anytime they knew anything that the girls were making or doing, it was big fun for them to steal. I think the chickens, though, them were the times that they had. And they'd have parties up in the hall, or up, there was parties upstairs over Cull's porch there. That was a saloon, I understand, at one time. And they'd come from the country and tie their horses up, and so there wasn't much sport in that, so they go, the women would go and untie, let the horses go in the cutters or wagons, and away they'd go, and the guys have to walk home in the cold. There was devilment, but it wasn't that bad a devilment, you know. Of course, Halloween was pretty bad when they tipped the toilets and
They used to tip people over and or the
Not
outhouses over?
tipped the outhouses, the toilets over. And of course, the next day they'd have to go out and right them up the right way, where they stand them back up. Yeah, a lot of water under the bridge since all them days. A lot of that is things too that I heard, you know. I was too young to be or to be involved or anything in it, but like Grandma Cull and Vivian and all them stealing it, that's stories that I sat at a table and listened to them tell.
Well, I learned a lot of stories and stuff from you, but the sayings is what gets me. You have more sayings that you can remember, like, what is it that Aunt Annie McCann used to say all the time? I mean, can you remember some of the sayings that you grew up with?
I
and that
know
you
them all,
carry
but
on?
I can't think right now.
Okay.
Yeah, they were all sayings our people said. And they spoke a little Gaelic, but not much, you know. Be the hoss,
What's that mean?
kiss my ass.
I thought that was Pug 'em a home.
Yeah, that is pug 'em a home. Be the hoss is be quiet.
No.
When they'd know that somebody, I remember my ma saying it, if somebody was coming in the yard, that when the women were visiting, you know, telling, gossiping maybe, and that's when they'd say, be the hoss. That meant, you know, be quiet, say no more. So and so is coming. Yeah, that's Pugama, or yeah.
Now, didn't Turner and his wife know Gaelic?
A little. I never heard Aunt Maggie and Uncle Danny talk the Gaelic.
And Mary Duffy was the last island resident.
Mhm.
She was the last immigrant from Ireland.
Her and Mary Doney. Mary Doney came, I think, with her when they came over. And Mary Doney's sister, whose name was Mary, no, not sister, Mary Early. They were the three women that were right from the old country.
Now, did they come here with marriages arranged beforehand, or did they just come on their own?
Well, I don't know about Mary Duffy, but they always had the story going about Mary Doney, that Doney went over to the old country and courted Mary and told her that he owned a lot of big ships and property, and like a very wealthy or well-to-do man. So he brought her back on the freighter or the steamer, I guess. And there was another ship passing her out there. Oh, he was a frightful liar. There goes one of me ships now, Mary. He didn't own a raft. He got her, he wooed her, and then came Patsy.
Patsy Doney,
Patsy Doney.
What do you remember of him?
Oh, God help him.
besides being an ugly man, he was,
He's the only man I ever seen eat cigarettes lit. He could put them on the end of his tongue and flip the tongue and the cigarette would go back in. Chew it right up. Oh, dear God. They ended up down in Marlette, living down there. And, of course, we were in Bay City. But I remember Ray and I, we were getting ready to, it probably was our first time to go to Florida. My sister lived down there. And we were getting ready to go to Florida. And we got the word that Patsy died. And I might have that again, my timing wrong on that. But anyway, I made the remark to Ray, well, if we weren't leaving in the morning to go on this trip, we'd go over to Marlette to this wake for Patsy. Ray said, what would you want to go over to Marlette for? And of course it was winter time, you know. Well, I said, I'd like to see if Patsy's better looking dead than he was alive. When they got him laid out. Because they could do quite a lot with people.
Is it true that he only washed the hand he drank with?
That's what I heard. But there was a frightful amount of lying went on here.
who was,
They made a story out of everything. They make a story out of, I don't know who the man was up in the country. I was only a slip of a girl myself, about some old man that died up there in the country, and the wakes were all atrocious. They always had a big party at the wakes. But it seems my dad was involved in this, one of the culprits anyway. Anyway, they sat up all night with them and had a big feed, a big meal at midnight. And there was always lots of grog they'd have. Well, I don't know what old guy it was that they were waking, but they went and sat him up, propped him up in the casket, and then called, oh, I don't remember who it was that called in, if it was a brother or somebody of the family. And here he was sitting up, well, good God, all hell broke loose. Here they thought, because there was no embalming. There was nothing. They just propped him up. They had a big laugh over it. Oh, God, they were bad. They were. But they got a big laugh out of that craziness they did. And like I say, that kind of stories is stories that were told to me. I wasn't old enough to be a witness to any of that, to be there, but I remember all that stuff way back then. Can't remember yesterday, but
do you remember like when the first automobiles came to
no,
town?
God, no. I remember the old Model A's and Model T's and everything. That's all that was around here. But your dad remembered all of that stuff. 'Cause like I say, he was older. He remembered and knew them. Model A's and Model T's.
Who was it that they said that was making booze underneath Grandma Cull's kitchen in the
That was Anna Reagan. She was making booze, and she had a front, what they called, she had a front. She was an ice cream parlor, selling ice cream. But she was selling ice cream out the front door and the hooch out the back door. And your dad claimed that he could remember, he always slept in that one bedroom, and he could hear them when they'd come and knock on that back door, what it meant. He'd up in his bedroom looking down at them when they'd be passing the bottle to whoever. The customer. That was Anna Reagan. And I think Aunt Kate was in on it with her. Kate Cull and Ann Cull. Oh yeah. Your grandfather had very colorful relative sisters. Aunt Ann and Aunt Kate. Aunt Kate cooked at the King Strang when Aunt Grace and I were working over here. And what a jewel she was. Always the customers had to have the whitefish. Whitefish was always the big seller on Beaver Island. But I remember Aunt Kate in the high heel shoes, worked all day long in high heels, like Daisy Duck, them little fat legs she had. And she'd sneak a piece of whitefish and not put it out for me. I thought the world of her. Kate Cull.
That was before you were married to Dad.
Mm-hmm. That was before, but she was always Aunt Kate. But then she was here when Michael was born. My Michael was born, and she wanted Michael named for her dad, Dennis. And I said, Aunt Kate, I can't name this baby if it's a boy, Dennis. I said, he's got to be named for his own grandpa first, Mike. But I said, if I ever have another boy, I'll name him Dennis. Well, of course, I got pregnant. How much difference is there in Mike and Dennis? 18 months, maybe? Well, here came another boy. So I sent Ray down to Gallagher's to send a telegram to Aunt Kate. Dennis Cull arrived 7 o'clock this morning. Mother and baby fine. Sent a telegram. I thought, oh God, she'll send a nice present for the new baby named Dennis, because she asked me to. She never even dropped me a postcard. Now, if you don't think I was hot under the collar, the hell with her. I'll not name another one what they want. But anyway, that's how Dennis came. That would be his great-grandfather, Grandpa Cull's. Yeah.
And now Carly came from Aunt Carlene, am I right? No,
My dad, Carl.
that's what
Carly was born my leap year baby. And I had quite an experience with Carly having her, and there was problems, and I had to go away and stuff. But I named her Carly for my dad. See, then Bonnie came, and Ann Vale wanted to name her. Oh, she brought her to me, and she said, Claire, she looks just like a little Bonnie Jean. I said, well, Ann, I can't name her that. I said, I've had novena going. That's when I found out I had Rh negative blood. I had a novena going to the Blessed Mother that if she was a girl and everything was all right, I'd name her for the Blessed Mother. So I said to Ann Vale, I can't name her. No Bonnie Jean. But I said, I will name her the Bonnie. Oh, she's got to be a little Bonnie. I said, all right, she can be Bonnie, and I'll call her Marie. Not Bonnie Mary, but Bonnie Marie. So that's how she got.
And now Jim was named after Uncle Jim.
Jim Cull.
Where did Julie's name come from?
I think I ran out of names when I got to Sis. And see, there was Elvira had a Julie Gillespie, Jewel and Rita had a Julie Supernaw and Julie Gillespie. I suppose I thought I had to keep up with them, have a Julie too. I don't know, I just liked Julie, I think, Jen.
Before we end this, Mom, I want you to tell me a little bit more about your sister, Ann. I want you to tell me what you remember about growing up with her, some of your favorite memories.
Well, like I told you, she went to Chicago and lived with Aunt Kay. And we didn't see a lot of each other. But that's ahead of my story. She ran away from Charlevoix, from my dad after he married. She ran away, but she let me know I'm here on the island, I'm married, and I'm living here. And she called and talked to me and told me what she was doing, or gonna do, and I was fit to be tied. Oh my God, I didn't want her to even think of such a thing. But she was going with 2 or 3 girlfriends that she, from Charlevoix, and they were going to take off for Florida. Oh my God, there was no such ever history of things like that happening back then. And I was fit to be tied, and I was mad at her, and I was bawling her out, and I was crying. She said, "Don't worry about me. I will let you know where I'm at and what I'm doing." So days went by, and then I started getting postcards. They got as far as Lansing, her and these other girls. See, she was trying to get away from my dad and this stepmother. And she did. And they went as far as Lansing, hitchhiking. I think there was 4 of them, or 3 of them, I don't know, her and either 2 or her. Anyway, and they went to work in Lansing in a restaurant, waitressing, dishwashing, whatever, till they scraped enough money and started out on the next leg of their journey. And she got to Florida, and that's when she met Dick Driggers. He was a policeman. Looked a lot like my dad, too. And his mother reminded me of Mama Left. Well, she stayed there in Plant City, got working, ended up marrying Dick, the policeman. And she lived there till she died. Had her 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. Lived there till she died with cancer, from cigarettes, lung cancer. Young, too young to have died, too young for that to have happened.
How old would she have been?
On her deathbed, her promise or begging was to her 2 girls standing beside her to not smoke. And they didn't. That was their promise to their mother on her deathbed. Don't smoke cigarettes. Yeah, she lived right there until she died. We didn't get to see much of her back in them days. And finally, when our first trip to go to Florida was with Uncle Bud and Aunt Will, the 4 of us. And we went to Florida to see our sister. We flew. And we got there, and they had a car. It was a convertible car. Dick, besides being a policeman, owned a gas station, or ran a gas station. So we got he had a white car, white convertible, however he bought it from somebody. But anyway, we got down there, and we took her with us. And we went on down the state of Florida and back up to Jacksonville Beach, to Uncle Franklin's. We had a big time. I got pictures of, well, we had a big time there. Aunt Margaret and Uncle Earl Miller. Franklin, I don't know, Dodie bought it or who bought it, but one of them keyboard things that they play on, well, they got one of them for lab, your Uncle Franklin. I don't know how he learned to play it, but I got pictures of him pounding the piano, or this keyboard, and us up dancing in his big room on the ocean side. Oh God, we were just leaving sparks fly. We thought we were, Aunt Kay and myself, we just were putting the leather to the floor. You wouldn't believe. But Franklin playing the keyboard, that was our music. But we took Anna Mae with us, she took a bus, I guess, back to Plant City, and we came back home. That was our first trip to go to see her. There wasn't a lot of traveling. She couldn't come. She had the 3 kids. Money wasn't that flush like it is nowadays. This penny earned is penny saved is a penny earned. Times can be tough. I remember the first time Dodo went to Ireland was after Uncle Emil died. And my sister called me, and I'm telling her all the news, and I'm telling her that Dodo was going to Ireland with Helen Pike. Helen laughing. Well, and I said, I thought Uncle Emil died. I thought she's a widow. I said, he did. He died. But I said, we have banks up here, Bob Bridge, money in the bank. She said, do you mean to tell me that she's borrowed money from the bank to go to Ireland? I said, yes. Just like the old song, $1 down and $1 a week. They paid it back. But she went to Ireland, her and Helen.
And she really had to borrow money to do it?
Sure. I remember we each gave her so much, I forget what I give her, $25 maybe or something. Those Irish glasses in that other hutch in there was a set of glasses that she bought for me, because I sent her $25, whatever I sent her. And each one of us, Elvira got, some were glasses and some were linens, tablecloth or something. But she got us, every one of us that give her money, this is what she did with her, bought presents for us. Yeah.